This podcast is brought to you with limited interruption by Rudy Luther Toyota. Whether looking for an exciting brand new Toyota, a certified pre-owned vehicle, or getting quality routine maintenance and service for your vehicle, Rudy Luther Toyota is the place to go. Rudy Luther Toyota, the southeast corner of 394 and 169 in Golden Valley. Subscribe to the podcast Beyond Politics. They host some of the biggest names and smartest minds. Beyond Politics is from a former Democratic congressman who helped ignite Barack Obama's campaign and a former campaign manager and political columnist. They go beyond the usual chatter on politics, news, science, and books. It's politics and everything beyond. On Beyond Politics, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Broadcasting live on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, as well as in the evenings on WCPT 820 Chicago's Progressive Talk. It is the Matt McNeil Show for your Tuesday. That's right. Get ready for the entire week going, what day is it? Hi, I'm Matt. Patrick here as well. Coming up in the 4 o'clock hour locally here, we got Patrick Coolican going to join us from the Minnesota Reformer to talk about various things. Patrick, how was your long Memorial Day weekend?
It was pretty good. I'll make one comment about it being the holiday yesterday. It's when everybody's going to put their garbage out and go, why did my garbage not get picked up? Oh, that's right. There was a holiday Monday.
Well, it is an off week. And it does not help that I got thrown for a loop this weekend by a German tongue twister that's now been converted into a song about Barbara's rhubarb barbarian bar. I don't know. All I know is abracadabra, and there you go. I put a link to it out there. It is one of the catchiest dang things I've ever heard in my life, and apparently it's what all the kids like. So, if you don't want to seem like an ancient fossil, hey, I listen to that. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. So, Memorial Day yesterday. Thank you to all the people who have served our country as veterans and the family members that serve at home right along with them, because I think that is something that you learn as a veteran, because this Chicago, this is probably going to scare you. I am a veteran of the U.S. Army. I know. Oh, back in the day when they had the nomenclatures, I was a 31 Charlie. I became a 46 Romeo, which kind of explains all this. But this is for military people. There you go. I'll let you you can figure it out yourself. I very proudly served. I have the longer I've gotten from the time I left the military to today, every day I actually get prouder of the fact that I did that. And my kids, it's nice to see my kids have a lot of pride in their dad that they did this. And yeah, it taught me a ton of life lessons. It gave me one of the greatest problem-solving mentalities of all time. Don't tell me what's not working. Tell me what is working, and we can make a solution from that. Okay? And I love that line, because, yeah, that kind of, if there was a mantra that worked up in my life, it's right there. Don't tell me what's not working. Tell me what is, and we'll find a solution. And that's how you do it. Thank you, U.S. Army. Memorial Day, obviously, is a day to remember the veterans. On Thursday of last week, before we went on the long weekend, I brought up the first Minnesota case. There's, so many stories of bravery, just regular people that all of a sudden were thrust onto a stage that required them to perform incredible deeds and bravery for the preservation of the United States against enemies, both foreign and domestic. And I am always in awe of the people that have fought before us, because, when you look at something like Normandy, when you look at something like what happened at Pearl Harbor, when you look at a bunch of farm kids going over and fighting in World War I, the military coming to basically soothe the concerns of a very scared public in the Spanish-American War, as that happened because of the threat to the American coastline there that was very real. Fighting back true evil at the Civil War, going back even further into the early conflicts there. You can look at the modern conflicts, the Gulf Wars, Afghanistan, go back to Vietnam. It was interesting. I went to my local Memorial Day celebration, and it is the Vietnam veterans are now they're looking pretty gray. They've you realize how long they've been around for now. And the Korean veterans, when I started off and I'd go to like these events right after I got out of the military in 1990, in the early 90s, there were still World War II vets that were showing up and stuff. And Korean vets, they looked old, but they weren't, they look old now. The veterans from Korea. So it was an opportunity to say thank you for all their service and all the thank you for all those that sacrificed. So I had something happen, and I kind of chuckle because of the story, but I am not very happy about this because of my military service. I served in the U.S. Army. I did not serve in the Marine Corps. You'll understand why I'm saying this in just a sec, okay? So my wife plays in a community band, and if you have an instrument and you at one point played an instrument and you'd like to continue doing that, community bands are a fantastic option, so I highly recommend them. She plays in one. She's played in one for many years. I have gone to many of their concerts. Most of their concerts are, they generally do, I think, 2 or 3. They do a holiday concert every year. They also do 1 or 2 just traditional concerts with standard pieces, but they also do a lot of the Veterans Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July, saluting America. They do those as well. And they have a sensational version of Stars and Stripes Forever, which I am a big fan of. They play, when it comes to these salutes to the military, a piece. They always have played a piece where they play the theme song of each of the armed forces. And I've heard it many times, and the way that it's gone for so many years is, I believe it goes Army, and then the Marine Corps, and then the Air Force, and then the Navy. Ding, 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 ding. And it's a fairly common piece. If you ever go to a band shell in your local town, you go to a local community park and they're having a 4th of July piece, don't be surprised you hear that. And one of the things they like to do is that if you served in that branch, stand up and get recognized. And, it's something I always have done. So they start playing the music. This is Memorial Day. I am inside the activity center in my town because it was raining here. And they start playing the song, and I can hear they're about to go right into the first branch. And so I stand up and I say, wait a second. That's not the U.S. That was a Caston song. That's the Marine Corps. And I stand up, and generally, just for your knowledge, the most people you find are Army. The second usually is Air Force, especially in Minnesota. This changes when you get out to the coasts. You get out to down to like Florida, stuff like this. But if you're in the central part of the United States, it's generally Army is your biggest, Air Force is your second biggest, Marine Corps is your third biggest, a few Navy guys, not a lot, and a few Coast Guard guys, and that's generally what you get. And so I stood up and I look around. I was like, well, there's hardly anyone else standing. And he goes, Marines. I'm like, oh, gosh. So I stood up at the wrong branch. Now, I did confer with my wife. Indeed, this was a first time they had played this version, and the Marine Corps song Let It Off. She actually showed me the version they're playing coming up this weekend for the anniversary of the D-Day invasion. And that one is the one that they've always played. Needless to say, I'm standing up for the Marines. And at this point, I said, I should sit down. I said, should I sit down, though? Should I be sitting down? I don't think I should. So now, for everyone else out there, you're probably saying, oh, man, what's the big deal? It's a big deal. To the Marines, I apologize. My bad. I'm sorry. No, I clearly did not mean to disparage you. And if any Marine would like me to personally apologize, you're more than welcome to call 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205, or comment at am950radio.com. I will send my whole most intentional condolences, because I should not have stood up for the Marine Corps theme. I should have stood up for the Army theme, which is mine. I did not feel as if it would be respectful at all to sit down during the Marine Corps theme, nor did I stand up for the Army theme because I didn't want anyone getting the impression I was like super soldier. So I apologize. I want to say I'm sorry there. I got duped. They juked me. Yeah. Ugh. I felt bad about that. I feel really bad about that. I also piggyback this onto talking about veterans. And if you've listened to the show a long time in Minnesota, I don't know if I've ever brought this up with the guys in Chicago. So I am a veteran. I don't care which political party you're from. If you promise me that you will endure the following 4 things for all veterans, I am on board with you. Now, so far, I've only had 2 politicians who have vowed that they would uphold this. One was Governor Walz when he was actually the first Minnesota representative. The other one was the former Senator Al Franken. Both of them did vow that they would back up all 4 of these. And from what I've seen from Governor Walz throughout his entire political career, and as well from Al Franken when he was there in the Senate, they seem to back that up. Now, that being said, here are the 4 things. 1, that if you're a veteran, that there are no massive hoops. We're going to streamline the process. You get the benefits you have earned. You and your family will get the benefits you have earned without any hoops to jump through, without any long-term problems or issues like that. And if a soldier has performed the greatest sacrifice for their country and has passed away, the family gets what they need without any hassle, period. That's number 1. Number 2, we have a problem with the amount of medical facilities for the veterans. We need to make it a federal law that if you are a medical facility, if you are a hospital, or even a cosmetic surgery clinic, and a veteran comes in for needed service that applies to your facility, that you have to see them. Now, it doesn't mean you have to rush them to the front of the line, but you have to see them. And you have to basically, that should be a law to be licensed as a medical facility in this country. That would immediately take away the strain on the VAs, and especially on the veterans who have to travel, some cases, 6-7 hours to go to a veterans facility. So, any medical facility, they will see. Number 3, free college at any public university in the country. They've earned it. Trust me, they've earned it. You strap the weapon to your back, put the Kevlar helmet on. You've earned that. You deserve that degree because you have sacrificed sweat and blood for this country. 100%. And number 4, job placement assistance for life for all veterans. You do those 4 things. You commit to those 4 things, you have my vote. I don't care if you got an R next to your name. You commit to those 4 things, especially that hospital one. Especially that hospital one and the college one, because that's generally where most of the Republicans I talk to kind of, oh, that's a lot of money. No, it's not, because you know what? The people that we're giving that to have gone out and earned it. If you do those 4 things, I will support you. And like I said, there are a few politicians that will back that up, will jump on board, will definitely kind of want to put that forward as their veterans policy, and I'm 100% on board. So far, most of them, yeah, I'd love to, but yeah, exactly. We'll take a break, come back. It's the Matt McNeil Show.
What's the move? I got 2, 3, follow me.
Higher, your love has set me free. Now nothing's out of reach. Higher, higher.
I run the days into the night.
It's the Matt McNeil Show on your Tuesday. Good to have you with us. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Coming in, we'll talk about Trump here in a second here because the closing arguments. It's not gone well for Trump. We'll say it like this. I did want to bring this up. Just a quick little note about social media that I have noticed. Reminder, the far right desperately wants our attention. The MAGA people desperately want our attention. This is why most of them are not on Truth Social, because it's just a bunch of them grunting at each other, and that's not what they want. They want to feel like they feel like they're winning when basically they're the biggest jackass they can possibly be. And that is basically to anyone else, whether that's, misogynistic comments towards women, anti-LGBT comments towards the gay community, or anyone with tolerance, or just attacking liberals because reasons. Now give me my government check. Yeah, okay. Now, that all being said, it's not nearly as bad. I mean, still, pound for pound, the biggest cesspool on the planet is Twitter. I'm still not going to call it X. It's Twitter. It's the biggest cesspool on the planet. I mean, it is just. I blocked more people on that social media site 20-fold than every other site combined. We get a little bit on Facebook, 1 or 2 on Blue Sky and Mastodon. But I've started to notice a rise in people starting to show up on Threads. Now, Threads, of course, is the social media site Instagram launched to compete directly with Twitter. And it is better. I think I like Threads a lot more because pound for pound, there's not that many absolute belligerent idiots on there. There are people who I think are plants. I do definitely think that there are Republican plants on Threads, especially after some of the comments I saw on Memorial Day. And I kind of made a post about that on my social media pages, the green page I put up. But overall, it still is a much more pleasant experience on Threads. But every once in a while, you'll get some guy that comes in here and will make a comment. This is some guy that is a financial guy who's a Republican financial guy, says U.S. states with the highest state income tax. And it goes California, Hawaii, New York, New Jersey, Oregon, Minnesota, where I'm at, Massachusetts, Vermont, Wisconsin, and Maine. Do you live in any of these states? Well, I do. I live in Minnesota. Now, Illinois is high, but I'm kind of surprised it's not top 10 high, but still. You know, this is the argument that these people put forward is your income tax is so much higher here. God, it's so bad. I'd rather go live in one of these other states. To which I responded to this guy. I love living in Minnesota. Imagine being one of these other people living in Texas or Arkansas or Oklahoma. You just lost everything to severe storms, and the state looks at you and says, well, you're on your own. Then you have to hope your GoFundMe page outsigns your neighbor's GoFundMe page, which, by the way, is a thing. I mean, these conservative states, many people have commented here that the income tax is only one tax that they talk about. A lot of people have kind of made points to that the insurance in these red states, because basically the insurance companies are on the slide if something bad happens. The insurance policies for your house or your car generally are much worse than the one you'll find in states with a government where they want to take care of their citizens. And then the premiums are through the roof. Take a look at Florida. House insurance in Florida, I don't even think they're even insuring any houses anymore down there. You're on your own. You have property taxes. Property taxes in many states, these red states, are through the roof because that's the only way that they can basically generate any money. Basically, they talk about sales taxes. Holy gosh, one woman brought up sales taxes. Sales taxes in some of these places is horrible. But once again, it's not that there's not just, their taxes, they hide their taxes. It's just they don't have services. I've had numerous friends who have moved from red states from blue states down to these red states who have moved back relatively quickly. The schools are atrocious. The roads are horrific. The quality of health care is non-existent. It's just awful. And you don't realize it until you have, say, the power grid fail in winter, like it did in Texas, partly because your state government was ineptitude. That's the name of it, is ineptitude. And their whole argument to the citizens is, well, maybe you should die. That, as opposed to fix it, their argument was maybe you should die. Okay. I had one person come back at me here and said, you can be happy in Minnesota and not be a jerk about where other people live, signed to Minnesota and Texas, in which I responded, I hope you the best. I wish your state cared for you like Minnesota cares for me. That's not being a jerk. That's me being factual. And it is. When the power grid collapsed in your state, it was a disaster. And your state keeps voting for these people that are purposely and intentionally hurting its own citizens to their face. That's not on me. If you are upset with me because I'm pointing out reality as opposed to the reality, I can't help you. Because that is the exact problem. The problem for you in Texas and in Florida and in all these red states is you've got politicians who do not care about you. Their whole goal is to trick you into voting for them so they can mistreat you worse than they did before. Do you know what it's like to talk to people that come to Minnesota, come to a blue state from a red state, and they say, I didn't want to come up here. I mean, I just got this impression that the life up here was just really bad and just, they're going to force all this agenda on us. I'm never leaving. Yeah, winters are tough, but, the schools up here are, even the private schools down where I lived weren't nearly as good as the public schools up here. Healthcare is 1,000 times better than it was. And you get a good wage. And it's a nice community. And there's parks and there's roads. And, yeah, that's a great quality of life. I think we need to start coming to grips. And by the way, this individual that posted the original post about these high taxes, he's just getting absolutely destroyed on Threads. Heck, my post alone has got 213 likes on it. My response to him. You need to stop voting for people whose only goal is to hurt you and hope you're too stupid to realize who's shooting you. All right? You need to stop that. Republicans are intentionally hurting you. And then they scream, it wasn't me, it was them, even though the other side had nothing to do with it. Go to rural America right now. Even in a blue state, the quality of life in the red areas of that state are worse because the local governments basically, out of spite, just don't want to help their neighbors. We had a case in Minnesota where there's a neighborhood that a family moved out of the metro area and moved out into this farm area, and they did everything in their power could run that family out of town. Everything they could, with a smile on their face, giggling and chortling as they did it. You guys keep going out there and voting for these people. That's not on me. That's not on anyone else but yourselves. And you guys have to kind of come to grips with the fact that you're the problem. You need to start voting for people that actually want to help you, not hurt you. We'll take a break, come back. It's the Matt McNeil Show. Broadcasting in the evenings on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, and in the afternoons on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. It's the Matt McNeil Show on your Tuesday. Good to have you with us today. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. So let's go into it. Closing arguments going right now. I'm innocent. Did you see? Apparently he didn't understand how courts work, and that in New York, the defense goes first in closing arguments and the prosecutor goes second. And so he made it see, he was upset and complaining, it's so unfair. They're making us go second or first. We should be going second. No, that's the state law. In criminal cases, the defense goes first, prosecutor goes second. That's how it is. And he didn't realize that wasn't just some personal attack on him. He is the biggest freaking idiot and the biggest freaking crybaby I have ever seen. He is a disaster, an absolute disaster. And you love him on the right. You do. So, let's go through. This is the Times coverage of the closing arguments. First of all, from, hey, I'm the liar. Blanche, he was back up on the stand today. A defense lawyer for Donald Trump said Tuesday that the closing argument of his criminal hush money trial that the former president was not only innocent, but also a victim of the extortion by liars seeking his demise. Yeah, I'm kind of laughing with that one, too. The person, in fact, at fault was Michael Cohen, his former fixer and a key witness for prosecutors in the first criminal case against former American president, said Todd Blanche, the lawyer who delivered the closing argument. During a sometimes meandering 3-hour closing presentation, Mr. Blanche declared that Mr. Cohen lied directly to the jury, that Mr. Trump did not know about Mr. Cohen's hush money payment to Stormy Daniels, an adult film star who said she had sex with the former president. Ugh. Blanche used sports metaphors and a rambling top 10 list in an effort to convince the 12 jurors that Trump's innocent, repeatedly taking aim at Mr. Cohen. He is literally the MVP of liars, Mr. Blanche told the jury. I'm surprised at that point Trump goes, what are you talking about? I'm the biggest liar ever. I'm the best liar of all. Oh, sorry. I'm going to sit back down. Later, Mr. Blanche tried to different sports-inspired description. Why are you guys doing with the sports things? Michael Cohen is the GLOAT, he said, short is for greatest liar of all time. Now, okay, I don't want to say that that's a bad policy and a bad idea, but that's a bad policy and that's a bad idea, man. Because, when I think of like the GOATs of all time, I think Jordan, Tom Brady, Gretzky, the greatest players of all time in any given sport. You basically just trying to do a little quirky little wordsmith associating Michael Cohen with them. I don't think that's going to have the punch you think it is. Trump faces 34 felony counts of falsifying business records, and it stemmed from his $130,000 payment by Mr. Cohen to Ms. Daniels, who've been considering going public in the days before the 2016 election with her account of sexual encounter in the decade before. Prosecutors have argued that Trump falsified the records when he repaid Cohen in 2017 for the deal, deliberately mislabeling reimbursements as legal expenses to conceal their true purpose. The financial documents were processed by the Trump Organization, the former president's family business. Blanche told jurors Tuesday that the prosecution had not met its burden of proof, adding that the evidence should leave you wanting more. He reminded the jury that only Mr. Cohen had testified that Mr. Trump knew everything about the hush money payment to Ms. Daniels, outside of basically every other person testifying and all the other non-person evidence they had. But sure, okay. The whole point was just to basically, it's Michael Cohen, that's it. Don't look at anything else. Don't look at, Hope Hicks's testimony. Don't look at David Pecker's testimony. Don't look at anyone else's testimony. Don't look at the checks. Don't look at anything. Michael Cohen bad. That was basically the whole thing. And like I said, he just, it wasn't good. It wasn't like it was, I don't think, most of the analysis of it I have read, including from some former Trump lawyers, have felt as if your argument is to create doubt. And sure, you kept screaming, we need to create doubt, but did you really create doubt? No one I know that paid attention to Blanche's 3-hour blithering testimony felt as if he landed any punches. You cannot convict President Trump of any crime beyond a reasonable doubt on the words of Michael Cohen, said Mr. Blanche. Mr. Blanche said that Cohen had an axe to grind because he did not appreciate what Mr. Trump did and did not do for him after taking office. Mr. Blanche said there was not a shred of evidence that Mr. Trump had plotted to falsify records related to reimbursing Mr. Cohen. Outside of those old checks that never mind. He also said that Mr. Cohen had a legitimate legal retainer with Mr. Trump as his personal lawyer. The records were not false, Mr. Blanche claimed, because in oral retainer agreement, prosecutors have said that no such agreement ever existed, but they're saying there is a mythical one. Several times, Blanche said that Mr. Trump did not have sex with Miss Daniels. Well, I mean, from her accounts, I don't think we could qualify it as sex either. I mean, are you having a seizure? Did your pelvis fall asleep? Oh, okay, we're done. Oh, okay. Well, that was okay. Silk pajamas. Oh God, you're never going to get that. Oh, I'm hot stuff. I mean, is foreplay for Trump watching Super Mario? What does this get you in the mood for? Uh-oh. He wrapped up the closing argument by listing 10 reasons that jurors are a reasonable doubt about Mr. Trump's guilt. The final reason was Mr. Cohen, who he called the human embodiment of not reasonable doubt. Like I said, swings and misses for the most parts. Now, there was one thing that happened at the end that basically is, you can't send this cherub, this little child, to prison. You know, once again, the Republican Party, I've always found it to be hilarious because if a black child commits a crime, the first word out of their mouth was, that 12-year-old knew what they were doing. Just lock him up for life. But when it comes to Donald Trump, it's always, how can you prosecute this little boy? Our sweet little boy. He's 70 years old, and I think he wears an adult diaper. So I don't think that that's necessarily a little boy at this point. I mean, just okay. I can't say that, joke, but you get my point. You know where I'm going with that. All right. Yeah. So anyway, they came on out, and he basically, the argument that he was making is Blanche was telling him. Now, once again, Blanche is a former prosecutor. So he should know better that you don't. What they're trying to do is build sympathy for Trump by saying, you can't send our baby boy to prison. You just can't. Well, that's actually wrong, and the judge was not very happy with it. As proceedings resumed this afternoon. So once again, defense took the morning, prosecutors get the afternoon. The proceedings began this afternoon. The prosecutor, Susan Hoffinger, reminds the judge that before the trial, again, he himself precluded the jury from hearing anything about potential punishments for Trump. Mr. Blanche was certainly on notice that this was an improper argument, Hoffinger says. Hoffinger also argues the defense misstated the law when it came to how legal retainer agreements work. In New York, Todd Blanche is now arguing that, saying he's willing to litigate the issue further this evening. Merchant was pissed. He instructed the jurors that Blanche's comments about sending Trump to prison was improper and they must be disregarded. He reminds them that a prison sentence is not required in the event of a guilty verdict. Now, I don't know what Blanche was thinking about here, that he thought that maybe they wouldn't hear this, but I don't think it helps his case that much that as soon as your closing statements are done, the judge has to come on out there and fairly viciously correct the defense attorney, saying he's not telling the truth. And that, once again, he clearly, no legitimate lawyer wants anything to do with Donald Trump anymore. No legitimate lawyer does. But still, I mean, this is just, how stupid could you be to set that up to where basically the last thing they're going to hear from you and the defense is you basically being told, well, yeah, you lied. Steinglass is the guy who's doing a lot of the Steinglass is the guy that's been doing a lot of the closing arguments for the prosecutor. It's unlike what Blanche did. He's telling a story with a narrative arc as he seeks to dismantle Blanche's arguments. Blanche raised and dropped so many different things that ultimately had nothing to do with his argument that it was hard to keep track of. Steinglass has been largely framing his argument through the use of timelines to lay out chronologically the facts at the center of the prosecution's case. These timelines seem to be helping him tell a coherent narrative. They also help situate some of the finer details the jurors have forgotten about through the weeks of the trial after a week-long break from court. So he's doing a much better job getting things there. It does seem like what he started off with Cohen. He very much, and like I said, I can only catch up so much here because I've been on the air since 3. But from what I saw before I got on the show, he was basically Steinglass was basically coming on out and immediately just dismantling the arguments that the defense had made during their closing arguments on Cohen. He basically, they left the table open on a few things. They said that, they went after Michael Cohen. He said he's a liar, but David Pecker, also corroborated the story. And he's a guy that loves Trump, and they tried to kind of brush past that. But then, so they went out, and then went after, they basically laid out the National Enquirer as that was an extension of the Trump campaign arm. Steinglass describes the Trump campaign's reaction to the Access Hollywood tape. Because reminder, what this becomes is something far more nefarious, considering the point was to kill this Stormy Daniels story in the wake of the Access Hollywood story, because a lot of people on the Republican side felt as if that was going to be do them in. And as a matter of fact, they even pointed out there were some Republicans that were so scared of this. I think it was the New York Times reported that back then when this happened, there were some Republicans that were even thinking of asking Trump to step aside and not run and basically withdraw and not have a Republican candidate that year because the Access Hollywood tape was so bad. He notes that the Trump campaign responded publicly that his words on the tape were locker room talk while quietly scrubbing the internet for anything that might be damaging to him. He notes that Hope Hicks did not exactly avoid Michael Cohen, who she said had a tendency to go rogue. Instead, Steinglass said she relied on him to use his media contacts as they fought back against the negative press. He is showing the jurors video clips of Trump himself acknowledging that the Access Hollywood tape and its aftermath could swing the very tight election. If 5% of the people think it's true, and maybe 10% Trump who says, we in one clip, we don't win. So there was the motivation. Now this gets to the heart of the case, is that this was indeed a conspiracy to basically try to help his campaign. He's walking through jurors through the testimony of Hope Hicks, describing what a disaster Trump understood the Access Hollywood tape to be, because he was in the room when it happened. In real time, the day came out, and the weekend that followed were distinct crises within the Trump campaign. We have painted a picture of just how desperate the Trump campaign was to spin the Hollywood Access tape. Steinglass reintroduces the jurors to Stormy Daniels during the same exact month that the defendant was desperately trying to sell the distinction between words and actions. So yeah, it was definitely, clearly that, that this was a disaster for him if Stormy Daniels came on out. Blanche, during his closing argument for the defense, sought to convince the jury that the prosecution's case relied entirely on Cohen. Steinglass took that argument on directly, but he also has taken it on indirectly as he moves slowly through the case timeline, showing every piece of documentary evidence the prosecution has. He is reinforcing just how much of the narrative relies not on Cohen, but on the testimony of the other witnesses as well. And to believe the defense's versions of the events, jurors will have to take Todd Blanche's word that Cohen was freelancing. And we already know, through testimony of Trump's own allies, that was not true. His own defense witness as well. We're done with that. We'll take a break, come back. It's the Matt McNeil Show.
Allô? Bonjour.
Hi, it's the Matt McNeil Show. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Okay, one last thing here. This is pretty brilliant. Steinglass has been absolutely leveling shots against Trump. A lot of the back and forth about who called who around Stormy Daniels' payoff felt dizzying, but the jurors have generally seemed quite engaged. Steinglass landed his argument by saying that while the sex between Daniels and Trump took place in 2006, the payoff wasn't until 2016 because his concern wasn't actually his family, as his lawyers have suggested, but rather the election. It's a simple deductive point that the jurors can likely understand easily. As the Trump family members have been sitting and they're staring at their phones throughout the summation, all of them looked up when Steinglass made this point. They're talking about me, Dad. There you go, Eric. I'm surprised it took people that long to figure that one out. I'm surprised it took people that long to come around to saying, wait a second here. If this was about protecting your family, why was it only right before the election 10 years later that you all of a sudden were concerned about your family? I say, it wasn't your family because you don't care about them, because you're truly a horrible human being. Speaking of which, Elon Musk. Okay, so a few weeks back, I do a thing on the blog. I do have a blog, Progressive Citizen X. And I do, for the most part, I do a Friday link on it. And it's basically some videos to get you in the weekend, nothing very heavy duty. And some of it's just, it's informational. Sometimes all the videos are completely different. Sometimes they relate. But a few weeks back, I did one on some of these car guys that review cars. And they're not going out there with necessarily an agenda per se, but they're going out to review cars. and the absolute disaster that is the Cybertruck from Tesla, from Elon Musk's company, which by all accounts seems to have been horrifically rushed to market. There's a movie from the 1980s called Gung Ho, where it's about a Japanese auto manufacturer taking over I think it's a Pennsylvania auto manufacturing company, and they have to produce a certain amount of cars by the end of the month. And to get it all done, they're just putting out cars that are falling apart. And it's a cute movie. It's Michael Keaton's in it. It's actually got there is some quality to it, and it's definitely a time capsule movie of the time. But one of the things I found was interesting was the cars were falling apart at the end just because they're frantically trying to get them off the assembly line. Well, that seems like what Elon Musk was doing, only he wasn't under a timeline. He just I want it out now. And so they put it out. If you watch the videos on that Friday link, they are truly eye-opening at how badly designed the car is. A great example of it is that you can't they got a rear view mirror that for the most part is useless because it's blocked by another part of the vehicle. So little engineering thought process went into that car, it's not funny. Someone shared a video with me. Why I'm bringing this up is someone shared a video with me this week of the Cybertruck trying to get over a fairly easy, which a river crossing, which frankly a Jeep or a Bronco would have no problem with. The Toyota Tundra would rip right through that sucker, no problem. And the Cybertruck just can't get up the other side because it's not really a truck. It's basically a paperweight with wheels. And so, yes, it's an electric truck sitting in the middle of a river trying desperately to get up. It's good fun. Yeah, it's good luck getting a tow truck out there. Good news is that Cybertruck is there, so any vehicle that wants to get across the river just run across that. They almost made it to where it's designed for you to be used as a ramp. I bring this up because we have talked about AI here. We need to pay attention to Elon Musk because that dude doesn't have a game plan. He's a bag of freaking cats. Elon Musk and his investors are betting $6 billion that bigger AI will continue to be better AI. Musk long ago parted ways with the other co-founders of OpenAI, but his AI startup xAI is borrowing OpenAI's "if you build it larger, it will get smarter" strategy. That game plan has worked impressively so far as OpenAI has rolled out one of the eye-popping demo after another, and new advances are expected to form the firm's next big model, GPT-5, by year's end. There's no guarantee such progress will continue, and if it doesn't, the massive influx of cash to these companies and the stratospheric market valuations they hold could abruptly end. Very few companies, perhaps only Google, Meta, and Anthropic, are credibly taking on OpenAI when it comes to making the biggest, largest language models known to frontier models. Those competitors have been at it for years, though. xAI is less than a year old. Hiring AI talent costs a fortune right now, and the tools these developers need, chiefly in the form of advanced AI chips, are pricey and scarce. $6 billion in a single venture round is a ridiculously large sum, but this year OpenAI CEO Sam Altman has been talking up efforts to raise trillions of dollars to build a chip-making infrastructure he thinks will be needed to support advanced AI. So we have talked about AI and that there are two definite mentalities within the AI community. One is we need to take it slow. We should not just be giving computers sentient abilities without making sure that that doesn't lead down a very ugly and bad path. Already they've had multiple cases where, just doing certain things, they've been stunned at what the computers have started doing on their own, and that's really scary. The other side of that argument is, what are you talking about? No, Terminator's not the real world. That's a movie that you're not going to get a computer system that's going to be able to launch the nukes. It just doesn't happen. And people have desires. They want a better product. That being said, I said Donald Trump. Elon Musk. Elon Musk seems to be the absolute worst case scenario for the damn the torpedoes mentality towards AI. And this is a guy that couldn't build a truck that is functional really in any capacity. And now you're giving him the reins to AI. If anyone is going to screw this up and create a massive technology problem because of a lack of foresight and jurisprudence, I'm going to bet it's going to be Elon Musk. Chicago, have a good one. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Minneapolis, St. Paul, hour 2 up next. Hour number 2 of the show here on your Tuesday, 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205 is the phone number. It was 4 years ago today that the 3rd precinct burnt down. The rioters took over the 3rd precinct. Now, we do now know that most of the people that were throwing the firebombs were not locals, nor were they liberals. They were far-right boogaloo boys coming from as far south as Texas up here to try to instigate a race war, and were the ones that are burning it down. But there were a lot of people from Minneapolis that were cheering on the downfall of the 3rd precinct. You remember that?
Absolutely. I even watched that live on Unicorn Riot. They were streaming that, and you could see that happening live. And, yeah, it's just seeing the crowd of people that were burning it down. It was, a lot of interesting-looking white guys that didn't look like they were around here, kind of like the, I don't know, like camo necessarily that they were wearing. They
umbrella guy and stuff like that. These guys that came in, they were instigators. And basically, and it's funny how the Republicans jumped on. It's like, it's all these locals. No, it wasn't. And once again, we've had court case after court case that showed it wasn't. Now, that being said, I've always kind of wondered, do you think that Bob Kroll and that Minneapolis Police Department, and once again, that's not O'Hara, Brian O'Hara today, the current chief, and the current police department, which is trying desperately to move past what it was at a time. Do you think at any point any of those guys say to themselves, maybe the local community hating you so much that they cheered on the burning down of the police department should tell you that you weren't doing your job really that well? I mean, do you think at any point that they self-reflect and they say to themselves, maybe, just maybe, because, if you're, run out of town with pitchforks and torches, generally it's not because you're beloved.
I wouldn't count on them doing much self-reflection in the aftermath of what happened. No. They were a little more focused on other things, including their little scheme with Gazelka. And basically trying to change the narrative into, it wasn't what it looked like. You guys were so bad and so mean to the people of Minneapolis for years. And once again, there was a lot of instigators that came in and did this, but a lot of people there are a lot of people posting the 4th anniversary stuff today who are clearly in the mindset of basically that it shows you how bad the police department was at that point. And the fact, Jaleel Stallings, was that the night of Jaleel? Well, Jaleel Stallings was the night before, I believe it was. Yeah, I don't think it was the same night as the 3rd precinct.
I think it was the night before. Jaleel Stallings, you basically attacked him. You went on a hunting expedition. It just tells you everything about that police department, man. And once again, I'm not applauding or happy with or, feeling as if this, any of this was good. But do not, eliminate the fact that the police department's mistreatment of the people of this city for so many years was a main cultivator of what happened that night 4 years ago. It was. It really was. And once again, it's just a lot of people coming in, boogaloo boys and stuff like this, but you don't get the community rising up against you because you're beloved.
No. No, and I mean, naturally, when you have riots, people are going to cheer when they see burning buildings, but that was a little bit of a different reaction than what we saw with the 3rd precinct. Yeah, people were generally kind of celebrating that thing was getting burned down at the time. Yeah. And once again, it was burned down by a lot of people that weren't from Minneapolis and a lot of people that were trying to instigate problems, but there wasn't a lot of tears in the crowd. I'll just put it that way. Yeah. And the fact that 4 years later, we still can't even get a building put down there because people don't want you back there tells you everything. That's another good point. Yeah, that's 4 years later. And people don't want them anywhere near them. So,
So yeah, that's an interesting moment here because I think after that things, that's when the National Guard came in and much more stringent. I do have to really quick here. I want to take a moment because I got into it with a journalist. Now, once again, journalists, I find them to be funny. There's this attempt to be I am this beacon of the press. It's protected in the Constitution. Don't you dare, you heathen talk show host. How dare you bring up things here? I'm a journalist. Okay. So I had an interesting back and forth with a journalist when it was at the end of the session and that Walz was basically signing a bunch of bills that were more than a one-issue bill. And this journalist was being very critical of Walz and doing this. And I said, okay, fine. But as Walz said in his defense when they pressed him on this, when you guys don't seem to be that upset about this, to which I brought the point. He's like, yeah, when were you guys upset about it? And very quickly, this journalist, because this heathen trained chimp on the radio over here, how dare you bow your head when I walk by. I'm a journalist, you talk show host. Very quickly brought up some stories where they indeed did question the hypocrisy of all of this. What brought up this story was apparently this journalist got a press release from the Minnesota GOP and then promptly went and questioned Governor Walz about said press release. Now, as I just explained, this journalist very clearly knew the hypocrisy of both sides on this issue. But I asked him, I said, when you got the press release from the Republicans, did you bring up the hypocrisy with them? The same hypocrisy you were so quick, so speedy to bring up with me to justify your reporting. Did you ever once, when they sent you a press release, which you used to go after Governor Walz, did you at any point go to the Republicans and say, hey, why should I be me asking this? Isn't this you the hypocrites? Funny story. All of a sudden that journalist doesn't want to talk to me anymore. When I point that out, that's called bias. If you're getting talking points that you're asking the governor from one political party, and at no point you question that party directly about, well, why are you making hay about this? Aren't you the 1,000-page bill? Vote now. Don't look at it. Vote now. That's your party? You didn't. I mean, you should have just thrown the press release aside because the hypocrisy of them, which you said you know about, should have overridden you even using that as a justification to go after Governor Walz. Now, I'm not saying you don't ask Governor Walz, but if you're not even going to question the source of your material and it's coming directly from a political party, I'm not missing anything here. That's blatant bias, isn't it?
To bring up a good point too, yeah, the Republicans certainly did that back when they were in control of the majority. Yeah, yes. They did that all the time where they'd have passed this bill with 45 minutes left in the 45 minutes might even be generous for how much time they were giving.
10. Yeah. 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and
then just your other point too, yeah. Press releases are press releases. You're going to get what they're going to try to convey, and yeah, I don't like the idea. I'm not saying they did this or anyone, but
well, they did.
Yeah, verbatim printing the press release. Yeah.
If you're going to take a press release from a political party and then act like you're a neutral journalist, come on, man. Mm-hmm. You're not a neutral journalist. Hey, I get it. But I never present myself as a journalist. I don't present myself as a news source. I don't. I read news articles and I bring my perspective on it. That's what I do for a living. And I'm pretty good at it. But I don't look... there are great journalists in this town. I mean, everyone over at The Reformer, we'll get to them in a second. All the guys at The Reformer are pretty exceptional. Brianna Bierspach, I think, does a pretty good job. I'm big fans of Susan Dew. The guys at The Racket do a pretty good job. Jay and the guys over there. The Sahan Journal does exceptional work. They're great. I don't mind you guys as far as journalists go, but don't make it so damn easy for me to knock you off your pedestal. And just because the talking chimp over here brings up the fault in your argument doesn't mean the argument doesn't have legitimacy. Okay? You may not like that, but if I can see it, What does that tell you about everyone else? If you think I'm the stupidest guy on the planet and I can point out your bias, well, man, you're not fooling anyone. All right, come on, man. Because let's face it, I am an idiot. I mean, you guys, you Patrick, I think we're all agreed in here, right?
Trained chimp, yeah, absolutely, yes.
Trained, Matt? Trained chimp? I just say more chimp, more just stumbled into the studio chimp, the chimp from the UFO movie, that sort of thing, crazy, out of control chimp, Speaking of good journalists, the Minnesota Reformer, you get, it is a Tuesday, even though, as Patrick pointed out, it's going to be a week where it's like, okay, what day is it today? It is a Tuesday. That means usually Patrick Coolican joined us, and he indeed
I know
did
it
show
kind
up.
of threw us both off. You're having to record on a Tuesday one. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's today, not Monday. So we were able to get that interview recorded,
Nice.
and we had a couple of good topics we highlighted today, including Governor Tim Walz signing that Uber Lyft bill. We'll kind of wrap up what's in that bill and thoughts on how that got passed and the preemption that it took to, get Uber and Lyft to stay in Minneapolis and a pay raise they're going to be getting for drivers. We'll also touch on Patrick's column talking about the Republican filibustering we saw during the last session, and we'll also briefly touch on teacher licensing in Minnesota and how it's been kind of shutting out some minority teachers who are trying to get jobs at Minneapolis schools.
I'm interested in hearing about that filibustering, because he did call that out correctly. And if you want to say how Democrats didn't get things passed, well, you got to make sure you point the finger at who's the cause of that. That was that filibustering they did, and that was the Republican plan. But still, they did. I will say this: Uber, Lyft, one of the things. A lot of things still did get passed. It just is not the agenda they wanted to, because the Republicans are terrified of some of those agenda items.
You didn't want to hear about them talking about cheeseburgers during their filibuster or whatever else they were doing. That was clearly not a great use of time.
It was not a great use of time, but you know what? They're not very good politicians. The Republicans are not very good at what they do. It's Patrick Coolican with Brett right here on AM 950.
AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Brett Johnson with you here on a Tuesday afternoon, and today we are joined by the editor-in-chief of the Minnesota Reformer. That's Patrick Coolican, as we'll be talking about some news and columns that they've been working on over at the Reformer, as today we'll be talking about Governor Tim Walz signing the Uber Lyft bill, as that has now become official. We'll also be talking about Patrick's column on how the filibuster came to Minnesota during the last session, as well as teacher licensing in Minnesota, and how a program that was originally supposed to help diversify our teaching workforce has maybe not necessarily done that job. So lots to get to today. Patrick, thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. So let's start off talking about your column about the filibuster coming to Minnesota, because as you write, the filibuster, or at least some form of it, has officially come to Minnesota. As Senate DFLers say, 2 debates on some relatively minor adjustments back during the session, minor adjustments they were trying to make to cannabis legalization, went for a total of 12 hours. That will be 12 hours debating just some minor adjustments to cannabis legalization. DFL also posted a video showing GOP senators talking about cheeseburgers when they were trying to debate some motions on the Judiciary Committee. And as you write, this is a rare column in which you do not necessarily afflict blame to people, but say everyone should share the blame for what marked the end of the last legislative session. So I'm curious for your thoughts. Who should be kind of sharing the blame for what happened for that very racious end to the last legislative session?
Yeah, I don't really think that anybody's necessarily really at fault here. I mean, we have a polarized country, we have a polarized state. The two parties have sorted ideologically. We have a right of center party and a left of center party, and so it makes sense that you would have sharp disagreements, and people feel as if the stakes are so high that either they must stop the other side from enacting their legislative agenda, or if you're a Democrat, we have to use every opportunity we have with this trifecta to pass what we want. And so I don't think necessarily that it's anybody's fault. To me, it just makes sense given the situation, which is different than in the past when you had the two parties were more ideologically diverse, and so you had more bipartisan coalitions, and those days are past. And I don't know that it does a whole lot of good to pine for that, because it's not happening, at least at this moment. And so you wind up in a situation where the rules being pretty permissive with respect to with amendments, you can offer an almost unlimited number of amendments and time to debate. that may have worked in the past when the minority and the majority maybe would negotiate on, okay, we're not going to go too long on this one, and so we'll make sure that give you guys a chance, and then you're going to let us, you're going to make sure that we have a chance to say our piece and so forth. We're now in a situation where those permissive rules can be used to really be a good delay tactic. In this case, it's the Republicans, but there's certainly there could just as easily be Democrats in the minority. We've seen in the state a swing back and forth. And so the minority in this case, they did seem to take extra time on a lot of these debates. But by the same token, the Democrats, they had all session. And so I'm not really all that sympathetic to complaints of filibustering when you had all session and you're still here on the final weekend and you haven't passed your bills. Furthermore, the Senate didn't do much at all on the final Saturday of session because one of the DFL members, Senator Omar Fatah, was negotiating the Uber Lyft bill, and he was using his considerable leverage to make sure nothing else happened until that bill got done. So nobody's at fault, everybody's at fault, and the question now is, what do you do? Because it really is important, I think, that democratically elected governing coalitions be entitled to pass their agenda. That's what the voters sent them to do, and they should be allowed to do it. The minority should be able to say their piece, and we should respect the right of the minority to make their arguments to the voters in preparation for the next election. But I think to have a functioning government, in contrast to the United States Congress and especially the U.S. Senate, where nothing can happen without supermajority, generally speaking, and I think that's just a terrible way to try to govern. I don't think we want that here in Minnesota. So the question is, what do you do to make sure that we respect the rights of the minority, say their piece, while also allowing the democratically elected majority to pass the bills that they want to pass?
Well, what do you make of DFLers possibly mulling changes that could, limit the timing on debates? Is this something that could, possibly lead to, actually having more governance, as you were kind of talking about, rather than just having endless debate? Because I like what you brought up, too, when you have endless debate. It's very tough for media and even the general public to kind of follow what's going on, where if you were to have, quicker, I guess, more concise debate, it would be a lot easier to kind of follow what's happening at the Capitol.
Yeah, I think it was the final Wednesday of the session. The Senate met all night into Thursday morning, and I mean that's not unusual at the end of session, and it's impossible for the public, for the media, for the interest groups, for everybody who has a stake in this process. It's impossible for them to watch, and so it's not a good idea to be meeting in the middle of the night. It's terrible for the staff, for the people who make sure that the Capitol is clean and safe. So that's another reason why I think it's a decent idea to have some ground rules about the length of debate. I got some pushback from a Republican legislator today who says, well, then you're going to have to limit the number of amendments. And, the DFL tried to do this in 2009 and 10. And then when the Republicans came back in 10 and won the majority, they took the rules out and went back to the kind of Wild West system. I refuse to believe that this is the only system available to us. This kind of anything goes, free for all, and there's lots of other models. Both the United States House, although they do sharply limit amendments, and I think that would be a bad thing. And then there's all kinds of there's legislative chambers across the country with different models. We apparently are on the one end, the far end of the spectrum, as far as being a lot more of a kind of a free-for-all. We also have a big legislature. The House itself is quite large. And so, if everybody wants to talk, it's going to take a long time. But I just think that there's surely a way to create some very reasonable rules around how much debate we're going to have, so that we don't have 12 and 14-hour debates. And let's be clear, nobody's mind is being changed by these debates.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very, very rare that somebody's mind would be changed. And even if their mind was changed, the pressure on them to vote with their caucus is such that it's highly unlikely. So it's a lot of it's a sort of theater, and sometimes it's fun theater, but a lot of times it's not. It's just a waste of everyone's time. And then, of course, it also is it's an impediment to the, again, democratically elected majority from enacting their agenda. And what I like about the majority being able to pass their agenda, unlike the U.S. Senate, for instance, is that then there's accountability. You pass your agenda, your ideas worked, then you can take that to the voters. Your ideas didn't work, then the voters know, okay, that was your agenda, your policies, you passed them, they didn't work, and now I'm going to vote the other way. But when in a system where, especially with the U.S. Senate, where everybody can just point fingers, and that inaction is sort of almost always the eventual reality of what's going on, then everybody can just point fingers and nobody's accountable for anything.
Reading more about Patrick's column, The Filibuster Comes to Minnesota, over at minnesotareformer.com, minnesotareformer.com. I want to talk about some other news stories that have been around today, and one of those includes Governor Tim Walz signing the rideshare bill that will be taking effect later on, as this is a bill that will help boost the pay of Uber and Lyft drivers throughout Minnesota and Minneapolis, as DFL leaders anticipate about a 20% pay increase for drivers. Walz was able to sign that bill surrounded by drivers and lawmakers who helped negotiate that deal with the city of Minneapolis. So at least with this signing ceremony, at least seems like everyone is relatively happy with this bill. All of the stakeholders, whether it's the legislators who were debating it or Uber drivers themselves, and even the companies themselves, seem to be relatively happy with the situation. Anything else we should note from the signing ceremony that occurred earlier today?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't following it real closely, but I mean, I would say that the city council of Minneapolis, I mean, on the one hand, they say they forced the issue, although I think Senator Omar Fatah was always going to be right there pushing this issue. He got a bill passed last session that was vetoed. It was Governor Tim Walz's only veto of his entire tenure because he thought the minimum pay rates were too high and would would dampen demand and maybe even force the companies to leave. So the city council, I guess, can take some pride in the fact that they forced the issue. But on the other hand, they were preempted. So it's been a mark of pride in Minneapolis that has had a higher minimum wage and some tougher labor standards, some pro-worker labor ordinances, because in their view, the state was not acting, and so the city took it up. Well, now you have the situation where the state legislature has preempted the Minneapolis City Council. I know some members of the city council were pretty upset with that as a precedent. So I think it's been an interesting interplay between the city council and the legislature, and some of the members of both, and how this is all played out. But yeah, it was a fascinating episode in Minnesota politics and policy, and I think generally people are happy that the companies are staying here. The drivers are going to make more money, theoretically anyway. We'll have to see how it plays out. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it is implemented and enforced, and to see if will rates go up, and if rates go up, will that affect folks of modest means who use the services to go to grocery shopping or doctor's appointments, or to get home from the bar. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But I think for now, I think a lot of DFL officials are quite pleased that they avoided some kind of a confrontation that would have led the companies to leave on July 1st. when the Minneapolis City Council ordinance was set to take effect.
I want to go back up to what you were just talking about with preemption, because that is an interesting aspect. Because normally, when we talk about preemption, where state legislatures override whatever the local city council passes, normally that's been the case where you have a Democratic-controlled local city and then a Republican state legislature. Obviously, this was a different scenario where you had a Democratic-controlled legislature overriding a Democratic-controlled city council, which I would understand the frustration and possibly some of the fear from city council members thinking, well, what's to stop Republicans from then turning around and doing this if they get the majority, saying, well, look at what the DFL did back in 2024 when they were able to override what we were able to pass. Now Republicans have a precedent to go by. So I could certainly see their end of the argument as to why they'd be a little nervous about what happened, simply because of now Republicans could possibly use this in the future.
Yeah, the Republican legislature in 2017, 2018 passed a number of bills, and they put them into budget bills. So Governor Mark Dayton, the DFL governor at the time, was forced to sign them. Like I think the plastic bag ban, for instance, in Minneapolis got overturned because of the legislative preemption. And so, yeah, I think that, and I think DFL legislators, especially the Minneapolis delegation, they were not eager to do this, but they felt like they were really left with no choice. Because that Minneapolis ordinance was a non-starter for the companies, and they really just did not want the companies to leave. So, yeah, I think that's the problem here for Minneapolis City Council, is that while they got a policy win, they also have to stomach this preemption aspect of it.
And one more piece of news to talk about, and this is an article you guys worked on over the weekend, and it's titled An Aspiring Teacher Story and How the Minnesota Licensing System Prevents Diversity of the Teacher Corps in Minnesota. And basically this stems from a teacher in North Minneapolis, a PE teacher, who is trying to teach at a school in North Minneapolis, an elementary school called Hall STEM Academy. But she has been running into trouble with what Minnesota has as a tiered licensing system, where basically this means a Tier 1 license is designed for people who haven't completed a traditional preparation program, while Tier 2 licenses are now limited to teachers enrolled in a teacher preparation program or who have a master's degree in the field in which they teach. This is basically designed to allow more teachers into the Corps without having that full teaching degree. But one of the issues is that you have to usually reapply for these types of licenses from year to year, and that can be a detriment to people who are trying to go into the profession when they don't necessarily have that job stability. So let's talk about this. What has been the issue with Minnesota's tiered system and some of the problems that we've run into unintentionally? Because this was something that was passed a few years ago that was designed to, well, diversify our teaching corps, but as was written, it's been kind of some mixed results in terms of whether that's really been the case.
Yeah, I think there's a tension here between making sure that we have qualified, properly trained, and licensed teachers on the one hand, and on the other hand, wanting to make sure that the barriers to getting into the profession aren't too high, because those barriers are especially tough on lower income folks and BIPOC folks. And we have a real problem with a teacher corps in Minnesota that is not sufficiently diverse. I think it's traditionally like 5% of the teacher corps are Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, whereas the student population is approaching something like 40% of non-white students. And there's all kinds of good evidence that Black students with a Black teacher before a certain grade level, really early on, is really influential and helpful and effective, and for a long time. The benefits are long term, and it's also true for white students. They also benefit from having a Black or Indigenous or another person of color as a teacher. So you got those two things there, and how do we balance those? And the legislature in recent years, after the Republicans had wanted to make it easier to get licensed. The Democrats in control of the legislature have wanted to make it harder. I'm pretty sure that's at the urging of the teachers union. But it's, there are obviously benefits to making sure that our teacher corps are properly trained. On the other hand, it does make it more difficult when you put up those barriers to getting the best license. And so that's the tension that this story explores. I think Melissa did a really good job. I should note that, and unfortunately I just realized that we didn't put this in the story, but it originally ran in a nice little nonprofit publication called Minneapolis Schools Voices, and we republished it with their permission. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
Absolutely. And you can read more about this article over at minnesotareformer.com. minnesotareformer.com is it's worth diving into this a little bit more to talk about or to at least understand that there's more to it than just trying to make it easier or harder to become a teacher. It's much more complicated than that, and I encourage you to check that out, minnesotareformer.com. We are just about out of time, unfortunately, though, as we have been speaking with Patrick Coolican, who is the editor-in-chief of the Minnesota Reformer. Again, the website one more time, minnesotareformer.com, for the best in Minnesota news and politics. Patrick, thanks so much for coming back on the show today.
Always a pleasure.
All right, let's take a break and send things back over to Matt McNeil on AM 950.
AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, the Matt McNeil Show. Quality journalism over the Reformer, that's for sure. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. So there's a story I came across over on Axios, and we have to bring this up because it's not a good look for Minnesota. It's a story about the school counselors. And I did not realize how much of a shortage we have in the state of Minnesota for school counselors. And to a point, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, let's get in the story here. We'll get into it. The American West and Midwest lead the U.S. with the highest students to school counselor ratios in Axios review of federal data has found. Schools in these regions have become the highest rates of racial resegregation in states over the past 30 years. Experts say the disparity of school counselors access disproportionately hurts students of color seeking mental health help or advice in applying to colleges of post-affirmative action world. The growing shortage of school counselors is also hitting schools amid the rise of social media bullying and school shootings. An Axios review of the American School Counselor Association analysis to federal data found that Arizona, a state with a large Latino and Native American population, had the worst student-to-school counselor ratio in the nation, 667 kids to one counselor during the 2022-2023 school year. That's more than double the ASCA suggested ratio of 250. And to my knowledge, only 2 states actually are below that. I'll get to that in a second. Michigan had the second highest at 598. Minnesota was the third at 544. Indiana 519. Illinois 501. The national average was 385, so well above the 250 that they recommend. Vermont is at 177. New Hampshire's at 199. They had the nation's lowest rates. The student population there is smaller than other states, and it is also predominantly white. Colorado had a ratio of 261, which has dropped from nearly 300 in 2019 thanks to a grant program to hire more school counselors in low-income areas. Nationally, there is an estimated 8 million students without access to a school counselor, according to the Education Trust. So there's 8 million kids who they don't even have a counselor at their school. Of those students, 1.7 million attend a school with police, but no school counselor on campus, demonstrating the focus on policing over mental health or college preparedness. Yeah, and by the way, that is a disturbing trend because that's Republican education policy there. It's like, we don't need counselors to help these kids get to, into college and stuff. We need more guns and cops in school. That's them. School counselors are certified educators who help students navigate behavioral challenges, boost achievement, plan out class schedules, set goals, and explore career and college options. They serve as liaisons between students and mental health professionals, state child protective services agencies, and university recruiters. School counselors are typically the first to know a child is facing abuse, struggling with hunger, or contemplating suicide. Having fewer school counselors prohibits students from being identified or being seen. A higher ratio of students in school counselors is especially evident in racially segregated schools and those with higher percentage of incoming students, said Eric Sparks of the ASCA. Unfortunately, when it gets too high, it increases the likelihood that a student is going to fall through the cracks. Based on states that report elementary and middle school counselors and secondary school counselors separately, 37 of the states, they achieved ratios of 737 to 1 for pre to K through 8 student school counselors and 232 for high schools. So overall, it drives it down, but at least the high schools are better. The U.S. Bureau of Indian Education, which oversees schools on Native American reservations that receive federal support, has a much better ratio, 179 to 1, which, once again, well below that 250. Not only is there a shortage of school counselors, but various studies show a lack of Latino and black school counselors in many districts. For example, only 11% of school counselors nationally are Latino compared to 28% of the student population in K through 12. They recommend that the states pass legislation to introduce policies that offer alternative licensing options and pay incentives to attract more school counselors. I'm not sure why Minnesota is so bad on this. But I can say my kids went to 2 separate, wealthy, predominantly white, wealthy, predominantly white school districts in the West Metro. Neither one of them seemed to have nearly enough counselors to manage the staff, the student population that they had. And as a matter of fact, one, which was a very prominent school in the state, my daughter was there, and when it came to a counselor appointment, it was something you had to schedule 2 to 3 weeks out in advance. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist that if you're having someone who is having emotional problems, thoughts of suicide, anything like that, 2 to 3 weeks out is a little bit down the road. We generally do pretty good here in staffing reasons, and so this does present to me a bit of a conundrum. I mean, how is it that we have, in the state that does value education and does spend a lot of money on education, and we have, I mentioned last hour, we have people that move to our state of Minnesota, and they'll tell you straightforward, the public school, and we're not talking the wealthiest public school districts, just any school district in the metro, they'll tell you straightforward, this is better than the private school options we had back where I was from. Quality of education in Minnesota is there, but you desperately need to have counselors. And I'm almost kind of wondering, is this a byproduct of cuts have to happen somewhere? I mean, we've talked about how Republican education policy puts a lot of unfunded mandates on schools. And when the Republicans have been in charge, that's been one of their go-to things, is they want to force a school district to do something. They just don't want to pay for it out of state taxpayer dollars. So it's an unfunded mandate on the school district. School districts still have to balance their budgets. So is the counselors, are they the ones that are basically sacrificed to cover this? I don't know. The third worst state in the country, though, for amount of the counselor to student ratio, 544 to 1. And I mean, I have a hard time wrapping my head around how even in that case, how any counselor is able to get any kind of relationship with any of the students in their school specifically. And okay, let's just put aside, and I don't want to, because psychological problems are a huge issue. I mean, that's obviously something we need more counselors for counseling purposes in schools. But there is a lot of just basic common sense stuff here. My kids, when they've had to go to counselors, when they've had to wait, a lot of times it's I've got to try to figure out how to get my class schedule to max out. I want to take this and this and this, and I'm not able to do it. I mean, that should not be something which, you have a 5-minute window to meet with the counselor and they'll see what they can do. That seems to be something there. Or when it comes to going to colleges, especially helping, middle and lower income families find options for college, the best college fit for you. Because once again, there's a lot of people that cannot afford to go and tour colleges, that they're having to basically apply to colleges blind and hope that they find a good fit. Well, a counselor can help out with that and help out with that dramatically. So it's more than just, someone's feeling depressed and wants someone to talk to, which is, once again, still a very good reason to have a counselor in the school. But your overall, if the entire concept of education is to continue the kids moving down the freeway of life, basically you're running into a dead end if the counselors aren't there in the schools to help out the kids get to that next level. Sometimes counselors, and, I talked about military. I was in the U.S. Army. I was talking about that with Memorial Day, talking about that earlier in the show. Sometimes a counselor is the one person that needs to look at a kid and say, hey, you know what? Maybe the best option for you is the trades or the military, or that option. It's at least it gets options on the table, as opposed to, we have a stack of pamphlets over there, go pick out which ones you want to look at. So I think this is something that on the to-do list after the Democrats win the state, House again in fall. Royce White, you say. All right. Wow. Okay. After the Democrats win the House again in fall, I think it's an important thing for us to address this. But I got to be honest, I am somewhat surprised it's gotten this bad in the state, because usually, the teachers union and the educational advocates, they're usually quick to point this stuff out. If we need to put incentives out there to get more, whether that's helping to cover the cost of the schooling, whether it's, streamlining the process, we need to look at some options here, because that's unacceptable. And it shouldn't be, school counselors shouldn't just be for the wealthier suburban public schools. They should be for every public school. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. We'll take a break. Come on back. It's the Matt McNeil Show right here on your Tuesday. AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, the Matt McNeil Show. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205 is the phone number. I want to say congratulations to Tim Walls here. Minnesota is sending a disaster response team down to Iowa to help local first responders as communities work to recover from the destructive and deadly tornadoes that tore through the state last week. Governor Walz announced the deployment of 8 members of the Minnesota's All-Hazardous Incident Management Team on Tuesday. The public safety professionals are highly trained and will give Iowa emergency management help with operating ranging from volunteer management with a disaster declaration process and debris pickup. In Minnesota, we are no strangers to the devastation of tornadoes. We know what the heartbreak accompanies the loss of homes and businesses and the necessity of working together to rebuild. In the wake of the storm, we're stepping up in support of our neighbors. My heart goes out to the community of Greenfield as they recover. Last week's storms left at least 5 Iowans dead and hurt dozens more while devastating parts of the state. Minnesota's team's deployment is scheduled to last 2 weeks. So you got this. I think this is a good thing. I think sometimes you do get these even. It would be easy, and I want to caution the left to say, it's easy to sort of sit there and say, oh, well, this was last week. How come they still can't help themselves? Well, but you get a town that gets wiped out. That overwhelms the system. And I'm not going to go down. I'm going to stay consistent. I remember when Katrina hit New Orleans and all the Republicans were screaming, they can pull themselves up by your own bootstraps. You mean the city that's underwater? I don't know. I mean, I don't think they can. The city with bodies floating in the street. No, I don't think they can. You basically have to send in someone to help. And one thing that I like about Joe Biden is Joe Biden doesn't care how the district voted for him. he sends in help when they need it. Governor Walz, once again, sending in help, they need it. That's what you do. But I do want to, one of the things we have to start understanding is that there is a great lie that's being told to conservative America. That somehow life is so much better in these red states. If you're rich, yes, probably. Where you can send your kid to the most private of private schools, that you can have the out-of-pocket gold-plated health care system, that you can pay the $20,000 to $30,000 a month you need to insure your house against the natural disasters which are happening on a much more reliable basis. That, yes, for them, it's great. But for the average person, it's a disaster because many of these states can't help their own citizens. Once again, this is what happened in Greenfield. This is extraordinary. This is the town itself got wiped out. You got to get more than what the state's got. But time and time again, we are a state that gets floods and tornadoes and fires and blizzards, and this stuff happens and we manage. And sometimes we need help. Absolutely. Federal government comes on in. But no one is there faster to try to help out the citizens of the state than the state. I made a point earlier about when a state fails you and then you basically got to hope your GoFundMe page outshines your neighbors. That's not an exaggeration. That's the reality of disaster aftermath in many places in this country. No one else is going to help you, not the insurance, not your local government. And so you have to go out there and beg. But at the same time, you're begging with every neighbor you've got. I don't want to be put in that situation. I'm very happy in Minnesota. Native Roots Radio is up next. Have a good one. We are back tomorrow. Till then, see ya.